Hi there. This is Latanya with Exit to Excel. This is the podcast where we are treating just job search game like an elite athlete because we know that it is just a game and you got to bring your A game to win it. My name is Latanya. I am your HR insider with 25 years of experience who has been on both sides of the table. If you've been here, then you know in addition to having laid off thousands of people over the course of my career, I've also been told my services are no longer needed 4 times. And so now I'm taking this 360 view to share with you what really goes on and how to win at the game based on this insider knowledge. So today, what we're talking about is after the interview and that period of waiting and wondering when, if, and how to follow up. And so it's the follow up dilemma, right? Do I follow up? When? What do I say? We're going to talk about all of that today. But before we go on, if you are not subscribing, please hit that subscribe button. If you like what we're doing here, then hit the like button and also share this with people because I know there's so many people out here in the job market who could really use this information. So I thank you in advance for doing that. And if you're not following me, then also follow me on my social media on Instagram, Exit to Excel, TikTok, Exit to Excel, Facebook, and also coming soon, LinkedIn. I'm so excited. So without further ado, let's get to it. Now, you've had a great interview, right? And you nailed your Star Plus stories. If you've been following along, you know, we don't just do Star, we take it up a notch, we take it to the Star Plus. And you asked smart questions and you got a really good vibe after the interview. So after the interview, they say, okay, well, we'll be in touch. We'll be in touch. Usually they tell you in like a couple of days or a week, right? And so then after that, you just kind of wait. Now, at this point, you're wondering, okay, do I send an email? Am I going to sound desperate? Do I not send anything? They might forget me. What if I wait too long? I mean, there's so many things that go through your head when you're waiting. And I know if you're like me, there are a lot of times if you don't hear anything in a week, you're like, okay, I didn't get it and I moved on to somebody else. Trust and believe. I have seen companies come back after 4 or 5 weeks after you've interviewed. So we're going to talk about that. You just never know. So the thing is, what I've noticed most of the time after being in HR for over 25 years is that it's one or the other. It's one extreme or the other. Either one, people are falling up to the point they get on your dang nerves. I'm gonna say the cuss word. They get on your dang nerves, or they just disappear completely, which tells us that they ain't really interested in the job, right? But there is a championship approach, a way that is a good balance that helps you stay on their mind, but also not being annoying and looking desperate. Because at the end of the day, confidence is not about chasing, but it is about confirming your value. So today we're going to cover the exact timeline for following up, the 4 touch point framework that works every time, how to read the signals they're sending, when to keep following up versus when to move on, and the fatal mistakes that most people make that ultimately ends up costing them the offer. So let's talk about what is really going on behind the scenes. So when you are applying, and I'm going to kind of talk from a large corporation because you would be surprised at all the things that are going on behind the scenes. There are a number of things that influence hiring timelines. Like I said, I've seen hiring timelines that go on for 4 and 6 weeks. And there's a number of reasons for that. One is the number of candidates that they are interviewing. Employers often wait until they've interviewed all the candidates before they make a final decision. And imagine that. Let's say, for example, you have 4 people that you've chosen to interview. And each of those people are interviewing with 4 people, right? That right there is 16 interviews right there alone, right? And with some of these interviews, sometimes you're having to interview with 6 and 7 people, right? How many rounds? I mean, I've heard some ridiculous stories about how many rounds of interviews you got to go through. So, having to coordinate the availability of not only the candidate, but also with the people that they're interviewing, that in and of itself tends to prolong the process. And then the approval process. So once a final candidate has been agreed upon and the recruiter is putting together the offer package, well, then it has to go through several approvals, right? The hiring manager has to sign off. Often their boss has to sign off. Sometimes the head of the HR unit or the chief HR officer has to sign off on it, especially if it's at a certain level. Oh my goodness, you just could not believe the number of approvals that has to go through. And so even though we try to fast track it, sometimes again, people's availability, you're not able to do so. So that can also impact the timeline. The position level. Senior level positions tend to um, have longer and more complex timelines only because of the amount of vetting that has to be done. And so the average process for a person at senior level is actually 60 days, believe it or not. Whereas at the lower level, sometimes you can get those done in 2 weeks. Company size also has an impact on the hiring timeline. Smaller companies, of course, can be a little bit more quick and more nimble, but these larger companies, oh my goodness, sometimes it can be a nightmare. Trust me. Now, another thing that can prolong it are the references and the background checks. So, let's say, for example, they are vetting their final candidate, right? They're checking their references, they're doing a background check. Well, you're number two. They're not going to communicate anything to you at this point because they want to keep you warm, as we say, until we can be sure that everything is going to fall into place with the final candidate we've chosen. And look, there's nothing wrong with being um not the first choice, okay? That's a whole different story though, but don't get in your feelings if you find out that they had an initial top candidate that turned them down or things didn't work out for whatever reason. Now they're coming to you. Don't get in your feelings about that, but we'll say that for another time. And then another factor that can influence the timeline are just, things like mainly the availability of the people who are either interviewing or the decision makers. Also, sometimes budget constraints can come into play. Hiring freezes, sometimes those put a halt to everything, which can also extend the timeline. So again, until they tell you they have hired somebody else, you're still in the game. Okay. So now let's talk about the proper framework to follow up so that you're not annoying, but yet you're staying on their radar. So one is, a 4 touch point framework we're going to talk about. One is the thank you email, which ideally is sent within 24 hours of your interview. Two is the value add follow up, which takes place 7 to 10 days later. Then the third one is the strategic check in, which is after they have stated they would get back to you. And then the final follow up is 3 to 4 weeks after they told you they would get back to you. And we're going to talk about each of these stages. So just know that the average time of, from the time that you do your first interview to the point where you receive your offer, the average timeline is 25 days. And to me, that's a little generous because I've seen it go on much longer than that. So the things to look out for when you do get that final interview, one, if it's a quick turnaround is if, you do your final offer or you do your final interview and they come back to you within, 5 business days to extend you an offer. That's when you have obviously probably fast tracked and they need to get somebody in that role like ASAP. I've seen that happen when somebody has unexpectedly resigned and they need to bring somebody in so that there's no gap, or they want some overlap to facilitate some cross training. That's where I've seen that they really able to fast track the hire to be able to accommodate that. But a rapid timeline indicates urgency, and it can also indicate strong interest and organizational urgency. The standard timeline after your final interview is 1 to 2 weeks. That's the most common waiting period after the final interview takes place. Now, the delayed process, and to me, honestly, the normal process is 2 weeks after your final interview. And again, this is going to happen mostly with your larger companies. This is going to happen if you have multiple candidates who are, going through final rounds of interviews. And then it's also going to happen with your more senior and specialized roles that often require multiple rounds of interviews. So, let's go back to the touch points that you should be doing during this process. Now that I've kind of told you what's going on behind the scenes. So hopefully it'll kind of make sense to you. Touch point number one is the first thank you email that you send. And this should be sent within 24 hours of your interview. Now, I don't recommend sending it right after you interview. I would let a little bit of time pass because in that way it gives you an opportunity to kind of think of your conversation and get back on their radar, right? But don't go longer than 24 hours. So what you don't want to do is send something generic. And that's like, hey, thank you this time for meeting with me. I enjoyed learning about the company and look forward to hearing from you. No, 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 no. Huge missed opportunity. What you would want to say is, and again, even the subject line is an opportunity to reinforce your interest and kind of put you top of mind. So you say in the subject line, thank you, and have your name there and the position that you applied for. And the message can go something like this. Hi, Lisa. Thank you for meeting with me yesterday about the role that you applied for or interviewed for. I really appreciated hearing about and mention something specifically that you discussed. It gave me great insight into how your team approaches whatever goal or challenge that you discussed. And then it goes on to reemphasize your interest in the opportunity. And then you can say, when you mentioned whatever their key need was, it immediately reminded me of my work at, and you can reference some work you've done in the past where and again, this is coming from your Star Plus stories and your brag book, where again, you're able to emphasize your fit and your value add and how you're able to solve their problems. Okay. And you're kind of doing it in a subtle, maybe not so subtle way. But again, re-emphasizing those key points that were discussed during the interview. Touch point number two. This takes place, I would say, 7 to 10 days after the interview if you have not heard back. Now, again, you're still sending the first email, the thank you email, but then you're going to touch base again. So don't just in the email say, hey, just checking in. Do you have any updates? This, again, is where you will want to emphasize your value and your interest. So in this note, you'll want to share a relevant resource. Maybe it's an article that you came across, or maybe you read something about the company in the news that you would like to share. You can add context or examples from the conversation that you had with this particular person. Or you can do a simple strategic check-in where you can say, hey, I want to follow up on the position. I understand these processes take time, but I remain interested in contributing to your team. And in that situation, you just want to be real brief, polite, and confident. Now, I will say most of the time, you are following up with the recruiter. Now, if you have the hiring manager's information and you have a good rapport with them, it's not a bad idea to touch base with them as well. But you might want to customize your messages, one for the recruiter and one for the hiring manager. And it might not be a bad idea to follow up with both. So you really need to gauge in terms of what the best approach would be. Like some hiring managers I know don't want to be bothered. They want the recruiter to manage the whole process, including the follow ups. But then some hiring managers appreciate, you communicating directly with them. So again, that's something you might want to gauge or even ask the recruiter directly if you have an opportunity to do so. But regardless of who you're communicating with, remember people are busy, time spans are short. So you just want to be brief, keep them your messages under 150 words and never apologize for following up because again, you're confident, you're not sorry, so there's no need to apologize. Okay? Now, touch points 3 and 4, this is where you're checking in again and checkpoint 4 is your final follow-up. So, touch point number 3 is after the timeline they told you has passed. So if they told you that they're going to follow up with you on a Friday and it's now Tuesday or Wednesday, then I would say it is appropriate to follow up again. And you see the message there. Hey, Lisa, I hope you're doing well. I know you mentioned decisions might be made around this day. So I just wanted to check in and see if there are any updates. I remain very interested in this opportunity and appreciate your time. Again, very quick, brief, to the point. Now, if you still have not heard anything, this needs to be your last follow up. And this takes place 3 to 4 weeks later. And you have the verbiage there. Hey, I want to reach out one final time regarding the role. I understand that priorities shift and timelines move. And again, you're, showing that you're being considerate there. And just again, reiterating your interest, but also letting them know that, hey, I'm not going to keep bugging you. This is going to be my final follow up. But this message keeps the door open while preserving your professionalism, right? And your dignity and not sounding too desperate. So that's 4 touch points right there, which I think are completely appropriate. They are at very good intervals. And again, they serve their purpose very well. Now, I will say, depending on the responses you're getting back, you can kind of gauge where you are in the process. If you send a note to the hiring manager or to the recruiter and they respond back immediately, then more than likely you are still in the game, you are still in the running. If they ask you for more information, hey, they're trying to make some decisions, somebody's on your side, so that is also a very good sign. If they want you to meet with other people or introduce you to other people, that is also a very good sign. Stay the course. Now, where there might be a little bit lukewarm is if they say, yeah, we haven't made a decision yet. We'll be in touch. That means they still want to keep you warm, but you may not be at the top. If you don't hear response immediately, and they get back to you in a day or two, they kind of take their time, then that means that you're still, they're still not letting you go, but you're not in the top, right? You're not being actively pursued. And if they tell you, well, hey, we should know something by the end of next week, that means they are vetting out other people. They probably decide on their final candidate that they're running the references and the background checks and all other stuff on. Now, your negative signals is if you are sending them messages and no one is getting back to you, if you are ghosted in the very beginning of the process, that means that you're not pretty much in the running, you're back up. And if they tell you outright that they've decided to move on or move forward with other candidates, then you absolutely need to move on. Now, the key here is, and I'm only sharing this with you not to upset people or anything, but you need to know what's going on. You need to know how to read the tea leaves. So the key is don't obsess, but just observe and read the signals. Now, one thing I don't want you to do is even if you are in the green where they are responding immediately, they want you to meet with other people and they tell you an offer is coming, do not take your gas off the pedal because until you get that offer in your hand, the job is not yours. I have talked to several people who stopped their job search, have even withdrawn from their candidate have withdrawn their candidacy from jobs they were being considered for because they were expecting an offer to come when it did not. So please don't do that. You need to keep your pipeline full until you sign that offer letter. Period. Point blank. End of story. Keep your pipeline full until then. Okay. Now, some of the fatal mistakes I've seen people make, and again, this is where HR is rolling their eyes, the recruiter is rolling their eyes, people who send too many darn emails. Okay. Yes, we get them. We're busy. We get 100 emails a day. The last thing we need is another email from you. So chill out. Two is people who complain about the lack of response they're getting. It ain't all about you all the time. Okay. So don't complain. If you're going to complain to some, your friends or whatever, but don't complain to the people that are working at the company you're trying to get a job with. Repitching yourself in every email. Don't do that. It's unnecessary. Also, getting too casual. Hey, what's going on? What's going on with the job? We ain't friends. All right. Keep it professional. Other fatal follow-up mistakes are, following up every few days. Don't do that. Asking about references checks. Hey, have you checked my references yet? Have you called this person yet? Don't do that. Emailing the wrong person. Get your names and positions right. And also stalking people on LinkedIn. These are some of the things I've seen happen over the years. And again, these will get you cut in a heartbeat. So don't make these mistakes. Okay. Okay. So now that we've laid all that out, let's go over your follow up action plan. So again, immediately after the interview, within 24 hours, send your first thank you email and then note the timeline in your calendar. 7 to 10 days later, send your value add follow up. But hey, keep pressing, keep applying elsewhere. After their timeline passes, send your strategic check in. But again, you're continuing your other interviews. And then 3 to 4 weeks later, send your final follow up and then move on confidentially if you hear nothing. So, this is where a tracker comes really in handy because if you are in the midst of several interviews, it's easy to get roles and people and status and stages all mixed up. So I definitely suggest putting a tracker together so that you can, stay organized and maintain your sanity. So, look, after 25 years of being HR, one thing I can tell you is that the people who get offers aren't always the most qualified, but they do tend to be the ones who stay visible throughout the entire process, no longer how long it takes, without being unbearing. So today we've covered the 4 touch point framework that you can use, what's actually going on behind the scenes throughout the entire interview process, how to read the signals, what mistakes to avoid, and how to stay professional even in silence. So just know that confidence, during this whole interview process, and during the follow up means that you're having a plan, you're adding value, you're respecting the process, and you're keeping your options open. Because remember, confidence isn't chasing, but it is about confirming your value. Now, if you want my complete follow up template library where I give you templates for every single scenario, every single stage, then comment below, follow up, and I will send you my email scripts. And I'll also include a tracking tool for you to keep everything together and stay organized. So, again, comment follow up below, or you can comment follow up on my social media, or even DM me, and I'll get that right out to you. And also, by the way, if you have a interesting or wild story you'd like to share, related to any of your own interview follow-ups, then let me know, because I would love to maybe feature them on a future episode. And as I was going through this, I was actually thinking of a couple of my own. So, yes, if you would like to share, then please let me know. So, look, hang in there. I know it could be tough, but just know that you're not just interviewing for a job, you're actually competing for your career championship. And we're always going to bring our A game to the field and leave it all there. So, with that, I'll see you the next time.